The Zephyrus Duo truly is a one-of-a-kind product. It's essentially a Zephyrus G16 with two displays. So the most logical question you can ask is that extra display worth the higher price? And what sacrifices does it make to house that extra screen compared to the Zephyrus G16? Well, let's find out. And please like and subscribe if you like these type of videos. From the outside, the Zephyrus Duo looks almost exactly like the Zephyrus G16. It's got a similar high-quality fully aluminum body from top to bottom. But it is a little more flimsy since there's a keyboard jammed in the middle. And that does make it a lot heavier than the G16, and you can definitely feel that difference in your backpack. And of course, that also makes it considerably thicker, about the size of a Strix laptop instead of the G16. On the back it also has this stand, which supports it when it stands upright, so that also adds to the thickness. But from the outside it is essentially a heavier, thicker Zephyrus G16. When we look on the inside, it is, again, basically a G16, having very similar components and almost the same power limits for their GPUs. At least on paper. We'll have to see if those power limits will actually be reached on either one of them. The Zephyrus G16 has lower and higher spec models, but this is the top spec for the Zephyrus Duo, with it only having a lower 5070 Ti variant. Now here's more proof that these are the same bodies, they share the exact same port selection. The Duo does have an extra USB-C port on its detachable keyboard, but that's only to charge its battery. And it also has its power button on the side instead of on the keyboard deck like on the G16, since the Duo doesn't have a keyboard deck. They use the same 250 watt power brick, which isn't too bulky, but they can also use a smaller brick on the go since USB-C charging is supported on both. Their keyboards are very different though. The G16 has this very sturdy, more classical keyboard layout, which feels very nice. While the Duo has a detachable keyboard, which you can use anywhere you want. It also feels nice to type on. But it is definitely more flimsy, probably to save weight. They both have a single zone RGB backlight, which is pretty nice. But the Duo's keyboard can also magnetically attach to the bottom display, so you can just use it like a regular laptop. This does put it a lot higher than the G16 for typing, around the level of a Strix G16, so it's a little less comfortable on the hands. Moving down, we have their trackpads. And believe it or not, these are pretty much the same units. They are both huge proportional to their bodies. They're both made of glass. And they have the same satisfying clicks. But the one on the Duo definitely has a little delay, since it's connected through Bluetooth to the laptop, while the Zephyrus has no delay. Although this does mean that you can use it basically anywhere you want to, and the delay really isn't that bad. Moving up, we have... One second, I don't know how to film this. Moving up, we have their displays. Yes, multiple. And there are some differences between these panels, so pay close attention. The only difference between the top and bottom panel on the Duo is that the lower one doesn't support G-Sync. Other than that, they're basically the same displays. But you're going to want to play games on the top display. I'll explain in a bit why. They're both basically the same OLED displays, so you've got just as pretty colors on both and perfect inky blacks. But the Duo is a slightly higher resolution, although the difference is so small that you probably won't notice it. But the G16 has double the refresh rate of the Duo. And although 120 Hz is plenty for even competitive titles in my opinion, you do really notice that the G16 is smoother if you put them side to side. One fun part on the Duo is that two identical displays with the same refresh rate means scrolling is super smooth between them, so lots of screen real estate. And that is exactly the entire reason for this thing existing, multitasking. The ability to just have two separate displays on a portable machine is godlike for anyone that does productive stuff on the go. Or, you know, playing Modern Warfare 2 split screen without someone peeking at your side. I cannot understate how handy it is to just be able to edit on one screen with other stuff on the other. Because doing all of this on a single screen on a laptop is pretty annoying. And believe it or not, gaming on that top display is actually super comfortable. Because it's higher up, it's basically like you're looking at a desktop monitor, and it's less straining than looking down at a laptop. They do both get just as bright, at up to 1100 nits, which is crazy bright. And together with their excellent anti-reflective layers, even outside use is possible for both of them. Although the Duo is a little more reflective than the G16. It's not by a lot, but it is there. But that is because it has a touchscreen, or actually two on both displays, which is a pretty big plus. The Zephyrus does not open up super far, while the Duo can almost go a full 180 degrees. But they have about the same display wobble, and both of them can easily be opened up with one hand. They feel quite sturdy. Now, when we get to their speakers, it gets a little bit complicated. The G16 has subwoofers on the bottom and big speaker grills on the top, so it really always sounds good. But the Duo has small top-firing speakers inside of its hinge, as well as down-firing speakers on its bottom. So it'll sound very different depending on its stance. So the Duo definitely sounds the best when it's standing up like this, but the G16 still sounds a lot better. It has more bass, it gets louder, and overall it just sounds better. But the Duo definitely isn't bad, especially in that upright position. I thought these two were the same camera sensors, but the Duo definitely looks grainy and a little worse. And while I think the G16 might have a better microphone, they could honestly be the same. But here's what I'm most interested in: performance. The Duo does have a 10 watt lower TGP, but it also has an RTX 5090 compared to a 5080. So which one of them is faster? Well, in Cinebench R23, their CPUs score basically the same scores. Obviously because they're the exact same chips, with equal power limits and cooling. Now in 3D Mark TimeSpy, the Duo is a little faster, but with that lower power limit, it really isn't that much faster for a whole GPU tier higher. I mean, it gets beat by full power 5080 laptops. But benchmarks don't always tell the entire story. We need to see how they compare in some actual real-world workloads. And these are gaming laptops after all, so let's see how they stack up in some actual games. As you saw, these two laptops perform very similarly. I did compare them at a lower resolution, since the Duo has a higher native resolution, which would have given it less FPS. But at the same resolution, they got basically the exact same frame rates in most games. There was an outlier or two, but in general, these two perform very close to each other. But shouldn't an RTX 5090 be a lot faster than a 5080, even if it's 10 watts lower? Well, in reality, the G16's GPU was reaching up to 145 watts in heavy games, while the Duo runs at 20 watts lower, only reaching up to 125 watts. And at these lower wattages, 20 watts does make quite a big difference. Asus has limited the 5090 in this thing for one reason: heat. Because there's a second display right above its cooling system, they're intentionally limiting how much power it uses to protect that OLED display. And this is kind of unavoidable. Any more heat than this and it could damage the screen or give it a lot of burn-in. But it is literally standing up, so shouldn't that give it way more airflow than the G16 sitting on a table? Well, yes, the G16 does reach pretty high temperatures at its max wattages. I mean, both its CPU and GPU are close to their thermal targets. Meanwhile, the Duo is chilling, staying a couple degrees cooler on its CPU, but way cooler on its GPU. I feel like Asus could have given this 5090 a little bit more power, but they're probably just playing it safe. But what does that mean for fan noise? Well, again, it really depends on what position you put it in. In the laptop mode, it is a little quieter than the Zephyrus G16. But standing upright, it is quiet. This is all during gaming though. In normal light tasks, both of them are completely silent. But what about battery life? The Zephyrus Duo has two displays, but also the same chip as the Zephyrus G16, so does it last shorter? Well, I tested their batteries in two different scenarios. In light use with one display enabled, and in light use with both displays enabled. I played a YouTube video on both of them until their batteries died, with their displays at 80% brightness, at 60 Hz, and with their dedicated GPU turned off. And with just one display enabled, they both last really long, but the Zephyrus G16 does last a little longer. But when you enable that second display, you do lose quite a bit of battery life. Although 10 hours of battery life is still really good compared to any laptop from last year. I mean, the Ultra 9 386H is a very efficient processor, so for light tasks, they're both gonna last really long. But which one of them has more upgradeability? The G16 is very thin, but the Duo is in a weird form factor. So which one has more modularity? Well, they both unfortunately have soldered RAM, so memory upgrades are impossible. But they do both have two M.2 SSD slots, so storage upgrades are very easy, and especially on the Duo, which actually has a little upgrade latch on the back of it. But the G16 has a Wi-Fi card slot, while the Duo does not. Although it does have an Intel Wi-Fi 7 card, so you don't really need to upgrade. But now comes the part where I shatter everyone's dreams. Let's talk about pricing. The 2026 Zephyrus G16 was released at the peak of the RAM crisis. So this RTX 5080 model is more than 4,000 buckaroos. But then the Duo also released in the RAM crisis. And since it's basically a G16 but with two displays, I hope you're not in any credit card debt. However, the G16 does have lower spec models. A 5070 Ti spec is actually kind of a reasonable price. And the Duo also has a lower spec 5070 Ti model, but that one is at a less reasonable price. I'll put links for both of them in the description down below for if you're interested. Okay, let's get to a conclusion here. Which one of these should you get? The Zephyrus Duo or the Zephyrus G16? Well, it really depends on how much money you have. The Zephyrus G16 is basically the best all-round 16-inch laptop that money can buy. And the Zephyrus Duo is that, but with two displays. That does make it heavier, thicker, and also slightly slower, since it has lower power limits than the G16. But the versatility that this thing has is just unrivaled. With no other device can you multitask on 2 displays on the go with this amount of graphical power. But that does add to the price, especially since we're in a RAM crisis. So here's my advice. If you do a lot of multitasking on the go with a need for high graphical power, get the Duo, if you can afford it. But if you don't need 2 displays, just get the Zephyrus G16 obviously. It is faster, thinner, lighter, and a lot less pricey. Then again, if you are considering either one of these, you probably have boatloads of money, in which case, the Zephyrus Duo is a really cool device to daily drive. But if you are looking to save money, you definitely can. Last year's Zephyrus G16 is like $1,000 to $2,000 less, and it's really not that much slower. And if you do absolutely need 2 screens on a laptop, I would just get the Zenbook Duo. It's basically the same as this thing, but without a GPU. And that is pretty much it. That's pretty much it. I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.
Talking and making weird noises.
Kill teammate brother, he's dangerous. Thank you.